listening to The Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen.
Happy Tuesday, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Motherhood Experience podcast. I'm your host, Val. So thrilled to have you join me for this incredible episode today with my guest, Katie Larson. Before we get into the episode, a couple of announcements up front. First of all, my sincere thanks and so much gratitude to Danielle from episode 19. Danielle sent me the sweetest card, complete with stickers. Who doesn't love stickers? Congratulating me on the first birthday anniversary. What are we calling it? Birthiversary of the podcast. The Motherhood Experience podcast turns 1 August 15th. We were going to have a little virtual shindig with some of the guests, and she is not able to attend. However, she sent me a sweet card. Danielle, thank you so much. And if you haven't listened to her episode, give episode 19 a listen. We had a lot of fun talking with Danielle in that episode. Secondly, the almighty algorithm asks for your attention. If you would like, subscribe, follow, share the podcast and the episodes. Pro tip, if you hit the share button, whether or not you share, if you just hit the share button, the algorithm thinks that the episode is getting a lot of engagement and will push it out to more people. So every time you see anything on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook having to do with the podcast, if you just engage and interact, hit the like button, hit the share button, whatever it is, it helps us tremendously by getting it in front of other people without really having to do much. So I can't do it without your help. Thank you so much for helping me in that regard. This episode with Katie is a heavy one, honestly. Katie and I met under circumstances in which I am so thankful for, but wish were completely different. Katie is a lost mom I met while I was facilitating the support group in my Fargo days, and she is one of my favorite people. Once you hear her laugh in this episode, you won't be able to not laugh right along with her. I will say she is the most compassionate yet sassy individuals I know. And just in case you tend to listen to the Motherhood Experience with your kids in the car or wherever, this one might be one you want to put some headphones in for. A time or two, it gets a little PG-13. That's what I will say for this. But you're going to really appreciate this episode. I'm so grateful that she was courageous and vulnerable coming on here and sharing her motherhood experience story. So now into the episode with Katie. Welcome everyone to the Motherhood Experience, where I am here with my guest, Katie Larson. Katie, it is such a joy to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me here.
Of course. You have a story unlike any other I am aware of, and I'm very grateful you agreed to come on and share with the listening audience today. So typically, I start every episode with ages of kids and stage of motherhood you're in. Your episode is going to start differently, and I would love for you to introduce us to your triplets and start from there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess after thinking about it now, it's going to be 8 years ago on September 5th that I delivered my 3 boys. So that's kind of my story, but my story long way is a triplet pregnancy. Have you ever been expecting one baby and the doctor's like, it looks like there's 2. And then they're like, oh, no, wait, there's 3.
So how many appointments did it take before you realized that there were 3?
It was 1. So, yeah, my partner and I at the time, my husband, we were doing fertility treatments. Very conservative, though. It was taking, oral medication and doing a trigger shot and timed intercourse. And so they had done 1 ultrasound, pre-trigger shot, and they're like, you got 1 follicle, you're good to go. This is it, and come back. that was the first time that it took. I got pregnant. We were all excited. We go to the doctor to do the, internal ultrasound, and Bob, I believe is his name. I'll never forget him. He takes a wide turn with that wand, and he's like, there's one, and then he's like, there's the other. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, well, we're doing this, maybe, I don't know what happened. And I was like, two. And we were just like, oh goodness. So we go into the doctor's office afterwards, and they made us sit in there for a while, and we're just dying. I'm telling my husband at the time, I was like, I didn't know this would happen. I was like, they just said there was one shot. I was like, I don't get it. And the doctor comes in, and she's got this like smile / like on her face, and she's like, well, what we saw in the ultrasound. And then she like turns her paper over, and she starts drawing, and she draws 2 circles, and she's like, so we can only see yolk sacs at the moment. There's no fetal heart rate to catch, because it was just 5-6 weeks or something like that. And she goes, so you have 2 embryonic sacs. And she goes, and in one sac we see 1 yolk, and in the other sac we see 2. And it was like, like, huh? And she was like, yeah. So that was a shock. Not only were we not expecting 2, we weren't expecting 3. And the poor doctor's like, I've never seen this before in my 20 years. She's like, with this conservative, in like the fertility world, that's very conservative treatment. We didn't do IVF or IUI. Like those would have been next steps. And so she said she'd only seen spontaneous triplets one other time with an IVF treatment, I think, in like her 20 some odd years. So
incredible. But also, how long had you been trying to get pregnant, and not that led you to seeking fertility treatment to begin with?
Oh goodness, we were probably married for 8 or 9 years, and had been that thing. Looking back, we got married pretty young. I was in my early 20s. We were both finishing educations, and we had moved, and we weren't, super interested in starting a family right away. We moved back to the area, bought a house, had a house fire, had to deal with that. And
That's
then,
right.
Yeah. And then after that was all said, it kind of felt like, well, after all of this, like now is the time. And in the meantime, like had kind of stopped, I guess, preventing anything, and nothing was happening. Right. So I would say it was about that 9-year mark where you slowly go in, and they run the tests and, the referrals and stuff. So it just, it was some conversations there. My doctor was like, well, you've clearly tried a while on your own. So it was a while into our marriage, I think.
Okay. So once you got pregnant then, and you find out now that you've got spontaneous triplets, potential identical twins.
Yes.
And this is super early in your pregnancy when you find this out, like right away. You find out you're pregnant, you find out it's triplets.
Yep.
What was the processing of mentally preparing yourself now from being childless for 9 years to preparing for 3 children at one time?
You lose your mind, I suppose. I mean, all the processes, there were, it kind of felt, it was very surprising. And it felt like, I felt like I was a teenager who'd gotten pregnant when I shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of felt like that, like, oh, I really messed up now. And
oh, wow.
I got myself into and I was like, I just wanted one. I had no idea. And so, right away, there was just like fear of like, how are you going to afford it? How are you going to do it? Your family talks you down off the ledge. And, they're all like, this will be fine. But it definitely, it took it took at least 4 weeks. And I remember, I even have some screenshots. Like after we came back, I emailed them again and I was like, can you like put that in writing so I can like read it? And like, if I have to tell other people, I can just be like, here, read this. And she was like, oh yeah. She's like, I bet that's a bit shocking. So yeah, I just kind of like had to read it and be like, how did this happen? But yeah, I don't know. It's like winning the lottery, right? Like it's scary
Mm.
and it's exciting. It's exactly what you wanted to happen, but you're like, I just was thinking I was going to win $100, not a not $1 million. You know.
Uh,
So like the best kind of lottery, but yeah, definitely very scary. Very like, yeah, what did I get myself into? And I think, like, I don't want to sugarcoat that. Like, I think anybody, that's okay to feel that way. I think what I've noticed now since having a multiple pregnancy is that a lot of other people are very excited for you to have multiples. I even had a girlfriend who had twins after my boys, and she goes, I was so happy for you and thought that was so exciting. And she's like, and now I'm pregnant with twins and I'm terrified. And I was like, you should be. I was like, that's fair. And like, no one, they just think it's, well, that's great. You're having two, but it's so much more complicated, when you get into it
yeah.
and stuff. So just, the more there is, the more risk there is. And it's, as my story kind of flushes out and things don't always end up,
Yeah.
with a happy ending, but.
And I want to get into that. I also, I'm still hung up over here on Bob and you saying he took a binder.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
Like, I do know what you mean, but it's just, oh, I love you so much.
Because I was like, why are you moving that? And then all of a sudden, like, just kind of, he knew what he was looking for. He didn't seem surprised at all.
Bob was pretty low key. He was just doing his job.
He probably had to. The nicest man in the world. But yeah, I swear that was yeah.
Okay, so how often were you set up for appointments then, knowing so early that it was triplets?
So that was, I think, 6 weeks that they went in, and I had, before we went in for that confirmatory ultrasound, they do the blood work, and my blood, like my progesterone and stuff was actually low. I had to go on progesterone supplements, and so they were just like watching those numbers, came in, did that, and then they were like, oh, we got something on our hands. So then I came back almost every 2 weeks. I want to say it was 2 weeks for a month. And then once we got to 12 weeks, we graduated from the fertility clinic, but it was every 2 to 4 weeks they were going in. With that amount, I mean, at first they told me they were like, they might not all stick. We've seen, lots. And then as the weeks go by, there might be 2 or 1 or something. So, and at that point, they didn't hear the fetal heart rate, either, because it was so early. So, yeah. And then we came back, and then, heartbeats were strong. And, we get spoiled being, like fertility moms or even moms of multiples, because I watch those little nuggets go from, like yolk sacs to turn into like little shrimp. And the next time I saw them, they look like little gummy bears, like you got a front row seat to watching them grow that not too many people do.
Yeah.
So those are my memories with them too, which is fun. But yeah, they also then, because one of them sets were identical, they were looking for that membrane to grow between the two of them to see if it was monochorionic di, whichever they kind of do that. So they were looking for that. So that grew, and we graduated from there. And they suggested an OB that was good with high risk, and said that I would, be seeing maternal fetal medicine. And I think by the time everything happened, we maybe had only gone 1 to 2 other regular doctor appointments, maybe 2
Okay.
with our physician. So,
And were you going to these appointments by yourself?
I would say it was like half on, half off.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of the, like, I guess while conceiving, I went to some of them by myself, like the ultrasound, the pre-ultrasound and stuff. My ex-husband didn't come to all of them, though. I know.
Okay.
I think I did go to some of them by myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And walk me through the timeline now of, I heard you say 12 weeks you graduated. And
Yep.
so then what kind of happened after that leading up to September?
Everything was pretty good. I got off the what do you call that? The progesterone supplements. They were all just kind of like, well, we'll wait and see. And they like kept passing every milestone, every check. They were growing. Their heartbeats were good. I had complained of a lot of like, I guess what they told me at the time was like round ligament pain. And they said, well, yeah, they're like, your uterus is growing 3 times the size, as fast as any normal pregnancy. You're going to have a lot of round ligament pain, and by the time I delivered with them at 18 weeks, they said my uterus was full term size, of a normal pregnancy. So imagine in 18 weeks, your uterus just, so like, it was very quick. I went through that sleepy stage. Where I couldn't get out of bed for a month. I luckily was never like sick or throwing up. But then just kind of turned into those achy painsies, which they were just like, you got a special case and it's going to be like that. And that's kind of where we were at. And with those, sometimes it's just wait and see,
Right.
what goes on with them.
Right.
So, but yeah, they were a fairly good pregnancy. I mean, overall, aside from them being the 3.
And so 18 weeks, Labor Day weekend.
Yes.
You were with family.
If I
remember.
Yep. We did like a yearly like cousins trip that we would do. We'd in Walker, Minnesota. Yep. And we're enjoying lake time and family time and everyone having a good time. And
did all of them by that point know that you were pregnant with triplets?
Yes. Yep. They definitely did. So, yep. Yeah. I think like, yes, they all did. Because I was like, what am I going to do? Like I said, they already talked me off the ledge like 10 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes. Yeah. No, they all did know. So
you were at your cousin retreat weekend, which I just love that was a tradition. And what happened?
We were sitting there eating dinner, and as you can imagine, with being pregnant with 3, if I did not eat at certain intervals, I would get hangry. Like I needed to have lunch, second lunch, an appetizer, and dinner. And so dinner was taking a little bit longer to eat. I wasn't feeling the best. And it took me a little while by that point to realize that if I wasn't feeling good, I most likely needed to eat something because I was hungry. And it was like this different kind of hunger, like I'd feel sick and then you would eat and feel better. So I was kind of just, like a little annoyed that dinner was taking till 7. And I'm like, we're 2 hours past, like normal dinner time. And we're just sitting there laughing, having fun, eating. And all of a sudden I just kind of get this urge, like maybe I have to go to the bathroom, but it wasn't quite a bathroom. Like you knew something was going on. And so like, I just got up real quick and excused myself to the bathroom. And when I got to the bathroom, my water broke. And in the toilet was my mucus plug. And, this is my first pregnancy. And I was a little bit stunned. And I was like, did I just pee? It's those classic things like when ladies say like, oh, my water broke. And he's like, oh, did I pee? So yeah, called, some of my girl cousins in and was like, what happened? What is this? What happened? Is this what happened? And then, then things got a little panicky and stuff. And, everyone's like, well, call your doctor. And at that point, like, I didn't even have my doctor's phone number.
Yeah.
I was like, I've only met him twice. I was like, I don't know. So yeah, they had me go lay down. They decided to call an ambulance to come and get me. Like my water continued to break while I was laying in bed. The ambulance came. We were in Walker, and they told me that they were going to fly me to Fargo via helicopter. And my first response was, "No, you're not." And they're like, "Why not?" And like in those moments, like all I can think about is like, do you know how expensive helicopter rides are? And what if my insurance doesn't
Right.
accept this? I was like, I'm not taking a helicopter ride. And so they had to argue with me and say, like, no, you have to go. You're too high risk. We can't drive you, la, 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 la. So they ship me up. We go. Unfortunately, nobody could come into the helicopter ride with me. I had to go alone with the flight staff, which they were very nice. They held my hand. They made sure I was very comfortable, like very sweet. I guess more sweet than I had anticipated that they would be. But yeah, got to the hospital about half hour, 45 minutes later, and an uncle had drove my ex-husband very fast from Fargo to Walker or Walker to Fargo. And he was there maybe a half hour after I got there. So yeah.
Wow.
And then we were just kind of in full assess mode from there.
And so you are in Fargo after being life flighted 18 weeks.
Yep.
Trying to maybe reconcile, is this labor? Can they fix it? What are they going to do?
Yep.
And so what did they tell you once they got you from the helicopter into the maternity ward?
Well, what I didn't know is like they had given me some medication on the helicopter to stop labor. And maybe I knew, but I didn't really understand what was going on. And so when I got there, they had me wrapped up in like a plastic. It was almost like a body bag. It was horrible. But because my water had broke, and if you have 3 sacks of water, that's a lot of water. And actually only 2.5 or 1.5 sacks broke. So not all of them broke, but it was a lot of water. So like, I remember like, they life flight you there and they get you out and they like unwrap you from all this plastic stuff. And they're like, get up and change. And I'm like, what? And like all this water spills out on the floor, and this nurse comes in and she's like, well, I'm supposed to test if this is water or if it's urine. And there's, like puddles all over the floor because they like unzipped the bag, right? And like, it just all went everywhere. And she just kind of flippantly or casually goes, oh, don't worry. She goes, I'll just get a sample from the floor here, and like bends down and dips her thing and like walks out. And they're like, yep, if you can just get, dressed and changed here. And I'm like, what? So then when we got to the hospital, not everybody seemed to be in a hurry, which was like, wow, why aren't we in a hurry? Things slowed down. And then it was Labor Day weekend. Mm-hmm. So not only was my doctor not in, maternal fetal medicine wasn't in, and they ordered an initial ultrasound just to, see. The test came back, positive. It was amniotic fluid. So they were pretty sure it was my water that it broke. And so then they did the ultrasound, the first one there, to kind of see what they were dealing with.
As they're doing this, is your mind trying to reconcile what is happening, or are you just thinking about, tell me what we're going to do? Like, what was going through your head?
A little bit, yeah. Like, wanted to know what, the status of them was. And the way that they were positioned within me was the twins were up top, very up high, almost like in my rib cage. And my singleton was down below. So like an upside down triangle, right? And I'd always kind of thought, like, man, that little guy's going to have to hold up the world in there, And at that point, it was almost kind of like initially accepting that I might have lost him, and it was a hope that the other 2 could be saved. We could stall labor, something like that. So that's kind of like initially what I was thinking.
Okay.
My doctor did have a conversation with me. I think on one of the second appointments is probably the one that my husband didn't come to, but he put it out there. It wasn't a very fun conversation. He was like, "Did they talk to you about this? Do you know the chances of this?" And like the odds are this. So like he spent a fair amount of time telling me all the risks, right? And and 2 weeks later, then there we were exactly. So like it kind of was like, well, he said this could happen. This is what happening. And it just felt like damage control. Like, can we save any of them? And just very surreal though, too. Very surreal. All surreal,
Mm-hmm.
like when everything is such a surprise and everything keeps becoming a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I now have like unfortunate coping mechanism where if anything good or bad happens, it definitely just, I can go catatonic and people get they're like, how are you so calm?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was
And
just
you're
kind of
like, you
like,
don't want to know.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it was just kind of like, well, let's get through this. Let's see if we can save them. Let's, just, and a lot of it too was with everything else, we got to wait and see what happens.
So how long did you have to wait and see?
Okay. So we're taking their Saturday night. They do an initial ultrasound. We see that baby A, the singleton, had lost a majority of the fluid in his sac. And then baby B, which was one of the twins, had lost what they had told me at the time was some of his amniotic fluid. And baby C was completely intact and totally fine. At the first ultrasound, their heart rates were all fine. None of them were in distress, but obviously, it's not good when one has no waters.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was, we'll wait and see. And then I think they let me sleep overnight, and they called maternal fetal medicine while they were out, on PTO and or whichever for the holiday, and I guess talked with them. And, they just kind of were waiting to see what would happen with me and how I would progress. And so then the next day, like throughout the night, I started developing a fever. So, the classic, your water breaks within 24 hours, you don't deliver, you got a fever. So then they're concerned about the fever. They do another ultrasound to see how they're doing that day. And baby A is down in my birth canal. They really can't even see him on the ultrasound. And baby B was still pretty much status quo. Heart rate had dipped a little bit, and baby C was fine as usual.
And did you feel like you were in labor with baby A already descending? Your water had broken. Were you having labor pains?
And then that's the thing too that I thought they kept asking me. They're like, "Are you in labor? Are you having contractions?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've never been pregnant." I was like, "What is it?" And they were so faint. Like that first night, or no, yeah, I had to really listen to my body, right? Like I had to sit there and be like, "Oh, like that's it." Like you could feel the cadence of it, but it wasn't like in the movies right away where you were like, "Oh my God, I'm in labor,"
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, I was like, oh, that is it. Like you could kind of feel them going, but like nothing more than like, I've had period cramps worse than that. Like that felt like maybe I had to fart. Who knows? Like I know. So they were very subtle. They were very subtle. And yeah, and then the second night my back hurt more and I couldn't sleep and was restless to sleep. And I think I was moving more into, active labor. Than my mom spent the night with me that night, and she said in my sleep I like whimpered at intervals. Like, so she was like, I think you were having contractions, most of the night. And then woke up the next morning again, and yeah, again, still couldn't see baby A that third time. And then that final ultrasound, baby B had passed away and did not have a heartbeat at that time. And baby C was still intact, heart beating and just fine. Unfortunately, then at that point, then they have the conversation with you that you need to deliver, you have a fever, and they need to come out sooner than later. And I didn't really I guess, like, think about what that all meant or entailed, even for baby C. And so they were just like, well, we want to get you to deliver quickly. So they gave me what I affectionately refer to now as the devil's medicine or Pitocin. And that got you like the movies. Like, they turned it on and they turned it up and full steam ahead. And that stuff, then you're in labor right away, right away, right away. Then for baby A, I delivered him, and they came and they got him, and that was, like, all by yourselves in the room, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I delivered that baby. Like, you have to call the nurse to come in, and like, nobody's there really. You just have to call them and tell them that you did, and then they came and collected him. And then I stalled out a little bit after that. And they said, baby B can't. Then there was the conversations of, well, if baby B is born, like, what about baby C? And, then they have to have the conversation where they tell you you're a sinking ship. And although baby C is completely fine, his ship is going down and he's going with it. And that's heartbreaking because nothing wrong. Heart rate was good. Water's intact up till the end. They're like, we just need to get you delivered. They put in, I believe, maybe they did this, where they put the gel in to try and get you going too. The same thing with Jack. Delivered him very much in the same fashion. They had left. We were sitting there in the room. I think my ex-in-laws were in there.
But just to clarify, at the time, they were not your ex-in-laws.
No, yeah, they were. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. They were there. That was a whole nother thing, even with them and like managing people in the hospital and in-laws and the things that they say. We talk about it in group, and like, I wanted an epidural. They wouldn't give me one because I had a fever. So they said, we'll give you morphine. Well, they have to bring 2 nurses in to deliver morphine to you. My mother-in-law is sitting on the other side of the bed, and she's like, I liked the other nurse you had last night instead of this one. And I'm like, well, this one's bringing me drugs. I was like, so I like her a lot, and so, yeah, there's just those weird family dynamics of people saying, everyone's emotions are heightened.
For sure.
And, like, in a family, I grew up in a family where in those situations, they don't say anything. My ex-husband grew up in a family where they just mouth vomit the most inappropriate things. So kind of like managing that, and delivered him kind of much in the same, like, I delivered, I think I remember they were in the room and I knew I delivered them, and I just had to look at my husband and be like, they need to leave. And then that was that. They came in, and collected them. And then that's when the shit show started, because they were twins, identical twins. They each, can't remember how it was. Either way, like, you think of an umbilical cord came in, they each had their own umbilical cords. But once I delivered Jack, essentially that umbilical cord inside is like a left on water hose, right? And I started hemorrhaging. And I think I ended up losing like 2 liters of blood. It's never good when you're pushing out blood clots and the nurse is looking at the doctor and she's like, is that a baby? And he's like, nope. And they were like weighing, how much I was losing. And it got kind of more to that critical point where things just weren't happening. And, that's when they said that we would have to go in and terminate the pregnancy because I wasn't doing so hot. So they cranked up the Pitocin from there, shut off the morphine because I was going into surgery. It took them about an hour, though, to prep the room because it was a holiday and only one surgical floor was open, and they had to open up another surgical floor, which meant they had to follow certain protocols when opening a new floor. And so it took a while, and so for that hour there, I laid dosed up on Pitocin, trying to push my little, brains out, trying to get them out because I didn't want to didn't want to have to do the surgery. Because once we agreed to it, kind of right before they took us back, the doctor, and he was preparing us, I guess, for the worst. He said, what kind of sticks in my mind forever is we may not be able to get him out intact, which is in all my mind I heard is you're going in and you're ripping my baby out of me, and you're literally you might like rip his arm off, or and you have to agree to that. You have to sign the thing saying, like I'm doing this, and it was devastating. Got into the room and they made me move myself from one bed to the other, and which I don't know why. I've asked people about that too, but they didn't put anything underneath me, and I dropped a huge like hemorrhage like right on the floor, and then they were all mad at each other because then they had to like clean the room, like it was just, it all seemed very like and then I lost it, and I remember just starting to like cry, and then they put me out as soon as they could. So yeah.
And do you know how long you were under?
Maybe about a half hour. It probably took a little longer than they had thought. He was the twin that was really high up there, literally in my ribs. So I think I was maybe only dilated to like a 3 or a 4, and to deliver them naturally, that was fine for how big they were, but they have to get all the way up there. So they had to manually, dilate me, and so apparently it took a little bit longer, and then get the bleeding under control. But yeah, it was about a half hour. I was told that he was born alive and with his heart beating. He was intact. That did not end up happening. They brought him to my husband, and my husband held him for the 5 minutes that he was alive. And then, his heart stopped. And by the time I woke up, that was all over. So
you come to, after being heavily medicated on morphine, Pitocin, emergency surgery, narcotics, and anesthesia.
Yep.
You know that the first 2 babies you delivered had passed. What did they say, and how did they tell you about what had just unfolded? Did they wait for you to recover? Were you still heavily medicated?
Yeah, I was heavily medicated and didn't really know right away what was going on. When I woke up, they just kept saying, "You're okay, you're okay, you're right here." And it's right here, it's right here. And they were messing with something around my neck. And what I've come to learn now is that when I'm put under anesthesia, I like to accuse people of stealing things from me when I wake up. So I immediately woke up and accused them of stealing my necklace off me while I was under. And they were all reassuring me. They're like, "It's right here. It's right here. No, it's right here." And then I don't remember like how I got to the room, but I remember asking my husband at the time, I was like, "What was that all about?" And he's like, "You literally just like opened your eyes and was like, you stole my necklace." And yeah. So they didn't really tell me. I guess I think they knew. I just asked my husband if he saw him, and he just shook his head. And I said, was he okay? Like pretty much asking if he was intact. And he said he was. And they didn't really say anything. I think they just kind of let it up to my husband and I to talk it out.
And did you get to see all 3 boys after?
I did, yeah. So there was a little while they had taken them. The nurses there do lovely, wonderful things like making molds out of their hands and their feet. But then they brought back in, they told me then that they were going to do that. And they brought them back in a cuddle cot, I think isn't that what they're called? A cooling cot that they were all in. And, said, "Here they are, and you can spend as much time as you want with them." and yeah, pretty much brought them to us. I think once I'd gone up and gotten to the bathroom, I think they just wanted to make sure that I was okay, and then they brought them in. So we spent about a day with them.
And tell me all three of their names.
We have Leni Pearl. So another interesting note is I say my three boys, but when they were born, they thought my first son was actually a girl. And I didn't find that out until I read their pathology reports when it came back and said three boys. And I was like, no. And I had to call, and they were like, oh, they must have been wrong. So we thought we had a girl. But Leni Pearl, Jack Stephen, and Milo Mark were in their order, were their names.
Yeah. And so during this time, I mean, absolute trauma and devastation, emergency surgery in the midst of it. So the physical recovery on top of just the weight of grief and loss.
Mm-hmm.
And then walk me through after that, going home and your life after losing your babies.
Yeah. Well, since I'd been at the family thing, you know, a lot of people came to the hospital. I saw a lot of my family in the hospital with the babies. And then coming home was a little bit of a whirlwind, because by then everybody wanted to, you know, come and see you and stuff. And I was slow moving. I actually think so. I delivered on Monday, and I couldn't leave the hospital till Wednesday because I had to stay and receive antibiotics because I still had a fever. So I was still running a fever. There's, you know, their standard course. And I was like, I don't need any more. I'm fine. Just let me go. So I had to stay there for a couple days. So I was just ready to get out and get home. You know, you've just given birth. So, and you come home and it's not exactly where you expected to be at that point. Everybody's all over the place. And yeah, that's like when the second half, it was pretty much right away when some of the other, you know, shenanigans started on the whole, my husband turning into my ex-husband. You know, we all deal with things in different ways. And, you know, we'd been through a lot, and I think his sister-in-law had come to see me, and he went out drinking with a friend and came home. Well, I had to like chase him down. I didn't know where he was. I ended up having to like, you know, it was just kind of a classic, very, not a good situation. He definitely gotten a little out of control that night. And then when got home, made it worse. When he got home, he didn't kind of want to like listen to us about like, no, you need to go lay down. And it was very chaotic. I'm glad my sister-in-law was there, but very chaotic, and trying to just kind of keep everybody's emotions in check, his and stuff. And then, you know, that was Wednesday, and I went back to work on Monday, right back.
I
to work.
still can't believe that. And I know you said part of you felt like you needed to.
I did. Yeah. Cause I was like, what am I going to do? Just sit at home and cry? And the answer is yes. That's what you're going, you know, like that is what you should do. But, you know, I'm one of those people too, who likes to just, let's just, you know, I guess classic mom is setting in. You feel like you're disrupting other people's lives by not being at work when you said you were going to be at work. And there's all these other responsibilities aside from yourself and things you got to take care of. And at the time, my work didn't have a good bereavement, you know, policy. And I work in a male-dominated industry too. So they were just more than happy to have me come back to work and not say anything. Mm-hmm. No, they cared. But so not the good choice there, moms, you know, take your time.
Yeah. And I think also, you know, depending on the people, regardless male or female, sometimes people just aren't going to say anything.
No.
And it's not because they're terrible people, but they don't know what to say. And so when did you and I meet in this timeline?
I want to say it was I think I came to you guys in like October or November. So unfortunately too, I had a cousin who was 31 at the time and was at that cousin's thing. And he passed away about 6 weeks after I gave birth to my kids. He had a son who wasn't even a year old. So the family was really kind of going through it. And at that time, his mom had said something like, are you talking with anyone? You should talk with someone. And gosh, I don't know. I wasn't doing good, actually.
Yeah.
I know I was, you go back to your gynecologist, and it's, you gotta, you're escorted out the back door so as to not upset other people. And yeah, they knew I wasn't doing good too. And so I think they had me talking with like one of their in-house counselors, just, around my appointments. And she brought out, I think, Area Women's Magazine with this great foundation called Harlan's Heart, and said I should reach out to this group of ladies for support.
And so glad that you did. I remember though hearing your story the first night you came, and you haven't even shared all of it yet.
Yeah.
And just kind of silently praying as you're sharing, like, Lord, she has been through enough. Like,
Yeah.
make it stop.
Yeah.
And so when you came to group, you have, I mean, even in our conversation tonight, you have such a way of, first of all, just you embrace authenticity like nobody I've ever met before. And you're so genuine and in the moment. And it's like, look, this is Katie and this is what you get. And you have been that way from the first time that I met you. And I love that. And I think that tell me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but I think that group was a great place for you because a lot of people maybe at that time with everything you were going through couldn't handle that, Katie.
Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, I remember, like, first of all, a group saved my life. I don't think I would have come out a very okay person if I hadn't had my community to tell me that it's okay. And, sometimes to get a check too, because even in my worst moments, there were other families who I was like, Jesus, like I went through that, but they're going through this. So it saved me 100%.
Yeah. And so just to clarify, your husband did not become your ex-husband because he came home drunk from the bar one night. You found out there was a lot else going on.
I did.
While you were processing the loss of your children together.
Yep.
And how, like, what was the final straw?
Yeah. So it was about 4 months after I had delivered the babies. It was, that was September. This was the end of January. A lot of that behavior had started and there was just some weird things going on. And it all just kind of came out one night when someone's like acting weird. He came home and had like immediately gone to bed, and he was self-medicating with drinking, and I was like, well, there's something weird, and logged into the phone, and there it was. And he had been having an affair, and he, come to find out, had been having an affair for the last 6 months. So he started the affair while I was pregnant, and then continued the affair, obviously, after the loss. Found out too, with like, how your Monday morning quarterback and you're like, that was weird. But he confirmed it too. He brought his girlfriend over to our house while I was in the hospital. Like I said, my mom had stayed with me one night. She sent him home and said, get some rest. And
he did not.
So no, he did not. I know, like I said, going through his own things. Drinking does not help make good decisions, I don't think, for anybody. And so, confronted with that, asked him to leave. And we from there, it didn't get much better. And I think I actually stopped going to group. I came to group like October, November, December, came for 3 months. And then that happened, maybe even went to January. And then I didn't come back for 3 or 4 months once I found out about that.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I think came back in about May. So all in all, like 8 to 9 months after delivering, my decade-long marriage was over, and that was done too.
And another loss on top of
another loss.
And
yep.
I still can't believe everything that you went through, Katie, and all of the ripples that it leaves even today. So you lost your children. Your marriage ends in divorce because your husband was unfaithful during the worst. There's never a good time to be unfaithful, right?
No.
But
yeah,
that was absolutely the worst time.
Yep.
And so how do you reconcile with life and functioning and trusting people and leaving the house?
Well, group helped. Like I said, I started going back to group. That was hard. Even in some of those things, I dealt with a lot of jealousy, I guess I would say, because you'd come to group and, we had some amazing ladies in there, and their husbands were very supportive and were there too with them, so it opened up a little bit more struggles too, but then like you're always there for me. And I think I remember one time coming in such a foul mood. Do you remember this? And I was like, I'm mad and I'm going to make everybody mad. And I was like, and I know what? I enjoy it. And you guys were like, that's adorable. Tell us more. And so like, he never shamed me for my shitty attitude. It took some time. How do you reconcile with that? You start going to counseling. I unfortunately we had to sell our house, and that took so we were divorced in May, and we didn't sell our house until November. And so I had to live in the house, albeit though at my choice, it was by myself, and dismantle that dream and move out of that. So that kind of lingered. And it's just like it's a slowly but surely thing, you don't have a choice really. A lot of people say, I don't know how you did it. I couldn't do it. And it's like, yeah, you could, because you really don't have any other choice. My other choice would be to what? Crawl, I don't know. I guess I don't know what my other choice. It was to not live or to live. You get up every day. You do the best that you can every day. Not every day you're going to do the best that you can. You look forward to going to group. You look forward to going to counseling. And so like the divorce too, very, and then I was single after a decade. I didn't almost even know how to live as not a unit, so there was a lot of that. And then dove into work, naturally. Love that. And then I don't know. I don't know how you do it. You have to.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have any other choice. I'd survived. I almost died. So at that point, I kind of thought like the worst had happened. And all I had to do every day was just, get up, and I had to do it.
Yeah.
Until it didn't hurt anymore. But I don't know. Do you ever not? Even you go on a great path of self-discovery.
Yeah.
I think is what you do.
It's not a journey that you can be prepared to take, and you don't know where it's going to take you.
Not linear. No.
So 8 years later, Katie, what do you wish people would understand or just know about interacting with you and your story?
It's not as taboo as it needs to be. I use humor, to cope with things, and I'll make jokes. Maybe they're not appropriate, but it's life. I think that awareness, like my girlfriend who is like, I'll never blindly like look at a mom of multiples and be like, God, that's great for her. Like I will immediately be like, the pregnancies are the pregnancies are different, and then obviously, multiple parenting. But I'm a mom too. So I think that's what, sometimes a lot of people forget. That's what I liked when you called and I was like, yeah, I am a mom. I belong on this motherhood experience because I'm a mom too. And just because it's painful and just because I might cry doesn't mean I don't want to tell you about them, because I love them just like anybody else. I had hopes and dreams for them. I had my experience. So don't discount me. I guess. And I think it's uncomfortable for people. And I feel that that's why I do freely talk about my story more, because I feel that people need to understand the reality of things. Having a baby is an awesome, beautiful thing. And sometimes it's a horrible, sad, it's like, I look at it as life and death now. Like when people tell me they're pregnant, I'm like, I just hope they get through it and everyone's okay. And to, have that same amount of caution because I think what I noticed then with like my friend who had multiples is she felt the need to portray this, everything's going to be fine, when you don't know if it's going to be fine. Like the suffering in silence. Don't let us do that anymore. There's no need. It happens to so many people. The silence and the awkward, stigmas that people place around it. Yeah.
How do you honor your boys in your life today?
So I've gotten a tattoo for them. I keep their urns. I had them cremated. I wanted them with me. I didn't want to have to leave them anywhere. They are on a shelf in my room. Their urns are little hearts. They're little silver hearts. And like my heart, they are beaten up a little bit. I slept in bed with them for quite some time to feel close to them. So they're a little scratched up, but they're on the shelf now. When I travel and I go to oceans, I find little seashells for them. I find little pebbles for one of each of them, and I put them on the shelf with them. Like family. My brother even went to the coast and found some driftwood, and he's like, this is for the babies, to put this with the babies. So yeah, we kind of honor them in that way. Obviously advocate for support groups. I think I loved craft night with you guys. So just like getting involved with the community and being the advocate for, unfortunately, the new moms that will join that club, to let them know. Yeah. You'll get through this. Your people are here. Go to your people.
Yeah.
So I think helping others honors them.
For sure. And I've met so many dear and wonderful people in such a terrible way. Like you are just one of the greatest blessings in my life, but I hate how we met. But thank you for being brave and vulnerable all at once and sharing your story with the Motherhood Experience audience. I know that this episode is going to touch every single person who listens to it, Katie.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it. Like I said, I'm a sect of moms too, and now that it's been 8 years, I haven't remarried and I don't have any more children. And having children is something I'm not sure I'm comfortable doing anymore. And at least the way I had envisioned. So it definitely still, has its touch. It doesn't go away. It's always there. I don't know where I was going with that, I guess.
Let me tie it into this though. Do you have people, maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, maybe it's strangers who pointedly ask you, like, are you going to have kids one day?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing while dating now about telling partners what you've been through, what you want and what you don't want. It's kind of like, well, let me tell you about this.
Buckle up.
God bless men. Most of them are like, whoa. So yeah, it is. And people will ask, like in dating situations, like they'll assume, they're like, when are you going to have kids? Or parents will be like, oh, I don't care if you get married. I just want you to have kids. And,
No, that's a bad idea.
Like, oh, okay. But yeah. Some, and I think it's like all out of kindness, like well-intentioned, they want you to live happily ever after and have your dream come true too. But I did a lot of work on me. I went to a really great, kind of like a leadership thing where it was a more personal, but I view the experience with my children as the greatest gift I've ever gotten in my life, which I think resonates with moms, right? They were the best thing to ever happen to me. If they had not existed, I maybe would not have had, the confidence to move on from a situation that didn't serve me anymore, and serve my future family. And that was kind of my thought at the moment was, if I want this family, this isn't the family, dynamic that I want. So they gave me the gift of my life, and I have a great career that I've, built up since then. I love to travel more, and I have a life that I never imagined I would. And it's all because of them. As sad as it is, literally the best thing that has ever happened to me. So grateful for them being in my life. So, don't be sad for us all. I mean, it is sad, right? And that's kind of how I feel about it. I held a lot of guilt for a long time, but they gave me my life.
Yes.
And what a great ride, huh?
Yes, Katie, I love it. I love you, and thank you for sharing Leni, Jack, and Milo with the rest of us.
Thank you for letting me. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow The Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.